In the quiet suburbs of any town, a picture-perfect family held a dark secret, one that would soon erupt into a story of betrayal, obsession, and murder. John Smith was a respected community member, a loving husband to Mary, and a stepfather to her teenage daughter, Emily. To outsiders, their life was idyllic. But behind closed doors, a twisted obsession was taking root, an obsession that would drive John to commit the ultimate act of betrayal. The story begins like many others. Mary, a single mother, met John and fell in love. He was charming, attentive, and seemed to be the perfect father figure for Emily. They married, and for a few years, happiness reigned. But as Emily blossomed from a girl into a young woman, John's affection for his wife, Mary, began to wane, replaced by an unnatural and growing fixation on his stepdaughter. He became increasingly controlling, not of his wife, but of Emily. He'd question her about her friends, her whereabouts, and her plans, all under the guise of fatherly concern. Mary, trusting her husband, saw his actions as a sign of a caring stepfather, never suspecting the sinister thoughts brewing in his mind. As his obsession with Emily intensified, John began to see Mary as an obstacle, a barrier to the life he imagined with her daughter. That's when a horrifying plan started to form. He couldn't just leave Mary. The divorce would be messy, and he might lose access to Emily. He needed a more permanent solution. John, a man with a basic knowledge of chemistry from his old college days, started researching. He spent late nights online, diving into forums and obscure websites, learning about tasteless, odorless poisons that would be difficult to trace. He settled on a particular heavy metal compound, one that mimics the symptoms of a natural, albeit rapid, illness. The change in Mary's health was gradual at first. It started with fatigue and nausea, symptoms easily dismissed as a passing bug or stress. Her doctor was perplexed, running test after test with no clear answers. Mary grew weaker, her vibrant personality fading as the poison slowly ravaged her body. John played the part of the devoted husband flawlessly. He was by her side at every doctor's appointment, held her hand as she grew sicker, and comforted a confused and terrified Emily. He was the perfect caregiver, all while meticulously administering small, untraceable doses of poison into her morning coffee, her evening tea, the very food he prepared for her with a smile. Friends and family marveled at his dedication. He's a saint, they'd say, watching him care for his ailing wife. Emily, too, saw him as a hero, her rock during the most terrifying time of her life. She leaned on him for support, sharing her fears and her grief, completely unaware that the man comforting her was the very cause of her mother's suffering. He was a master manipulator, weaving a web of deceit so intricate that no one suspected a thing. He used Emily's vulnerability to draw her closer, positioning himself as the only person who truly understood her pain. The doctors remained baffled. Mary's condition deteriorated rapidly. Her organs began to fail, and she slipped into a coma. The medical team tried everything, but nothing worked. It was as if her body was simply giving up. Finally, after weeks of agonizing decline, Mary passed away. The official cause of death was listed as complications from a rare, unidentified autoimmune disorder. The community mourned the loss of a kind and gentle woman, taken too soon. At the funeral, John's performance was Oscar-worthy. He was the grieving widower, inconsolable, leaning heavily on Emily for support. He had everyone fooled. With Mary gone, John wasted no time putting the next phase of his plan into motion. He tightened his grip on Emily, isolating her from friends and extended family under the pretense of protecting her in her grief. He told her they only had each other now, that they needed to stick together. He showered her with gifts and attention, blurring the lines between a stepfather and something more. The grieving and vulnerable teenager, who had just lost her mother, found herself increasingly dependent on him. He was her guardian, her confidant, her only source of stability in a world that had been turned upside down. But John's obsession couldn't remain hidden forever. He became possessive, his affection turning suffocating. He proposed to Emily just a few months after her mother's death, framing it as a way to formalize their family unit, to ensure he could always be there to take care of her. He claimed it was what her mother would have wanted. Confused, grieving, and manipulated, Emily, still a minor, felt trapped. It was this shocking proposal that finally raised a red flag for Mary's sister, Carol. Carol had always found John a little too smooth, a little too perfect. The speed at which he moved on from his wife's death, and his inappropriate desire to marry his stepdaughter, set off alarm bells. Carol couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong with Mary's sudden illness and death. She started digging. Remembering a comment Mary had made about a strange metallic taste in her tea a few weeks before she fell ill, Carol's suspicion grew. She began her own quiet investigation, talking to Mary's friends and piecing together a timeline. Her persistence led her to contact the police, voicing her concerns and demanding they take another look at Mary's case. At first, the authorities were skeptical. John was a pillar of the community, a grieving husband. There was no evidence of foul play, but Carol was relentless. Her persistence paid off. A skeptical detective, intrigued by the sheer conviction in Carol's voice, decided to discreetly look into John's recent activities. He discovered John's late-night internet searches, the digital breadcrumbs leading back to websites about obscure poisons. This was the break they needed. Armed with this new information, the police obtained a court order to exhume Mary's body for further testing. The toxicology reports were shocking. They revealed lethal levels of the exact heavy metal compound John had researched. The rare disease was, in fact, systematic poisoning. The evidence was undeniable. John was arrested. The perfect facade he had so carefully constructed crumbled in an instant. The news sent shockwaves through the community. The man they had admired as a devoted husband was exposed as a cold-blooded killer. For Emily, the revelation was a cataclysmic blow. The man who she thought was her protector, the one she had leaned on after her mother's death, was her mother's murderer? The psychological trauma was immense. She had been living with, and being manipulated by, the monster who had stolen her mother from her. The trial was a media sensation. The prosecution laid out the chilling timeline of John's deceit, from his twisted obsession with Emily to the calculated poisoning of his wife. His internet history, the toxicology reports, and Carol's testimony painted a damning picture. John maintained his innocence, but his web of lies had completely unraveled. The jury found him guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, his dark fantasy ending in a cold prison cell. This case serves as a terrifying reminder that monsters don't always lurk in the shadows. Sometimes they sit at our dinner tables, disguised as loving family members. It's a story about the darkest depths of obsession and the chilling reality of betrayal from those we are supposed to trust the most. Emily, with the support of her Aunt Carol and extensive therapy, began the long and difficult journey of healing from the profound trauma and betrayal she endured. Her mother's memory was finally honored with justice, but the scars of John's horrific actions would remain forever. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more true crime documentaries. Stay safe.